And the quiet land of Gilead, a child is born, a child who would carry the weight of shame before he ever drew his first breath. His name was Jephthah, son of Gilead, but not of his wife. His mother was a prostitute, and the whispers began before his first cry faded into the wind. As the years passed, Jephthah grew strong, fierce eyes, a brave heart, but every gaze he met carried scorn. His half-brothers reminded him daily, "You are not one of us. You have no inheritance in our father's house." Driven by rejection, Jephthah fled to the land of Tob, a rugged place of outcasts and broken men. There, his pain became power. The unwanted boy became a leader of warriors, forged in fire and bitterness. Years later, the land Jephthah once called home trembled under the shadow of war. The Ammonites had risen, sweeping across Israel's borders with fire and fury. The elders of Gilead, those who once watched Jephthah be cast out, now found themselves desperate. One night, under a starlit sky, they rode to Tob. Dust settled around their horses as they called out to the man they had abandoned. "Jephthah, come, lead us in battle, that we may fight the Ammonites." Jephthah stepped from the shadows, his expression cold yet calm. "Did you not hate me? Did you not drive me away? And now you come when you are in trouble?" The elders bowed their heads. Desperation has a way of humbling even the proud. "We turn to you now," they pleaded, "fight for us, and you shall be our head over all Gilead." Jephthah's silence lingered like a storm about to break. Then, slowly, he nodded. "If the Lord delivers them into my hands, then I shall rule over you." Before drawing his sword, Jephthah chose his words. A true leader fights only when reason fails. He sent messengers to the king of Ammon, speaking with wisdom. "Israel took no land from you. We passed through the wilderness, and the Lord gave us victory over Sihon and Og. Why then do you fight against us?" But the king of Ammon ignored his plea, blinded by pride and greed. Jephthah's eyes hardened. "So be it," he whispered. "If they reject peace, they will face God's judgment." As the warriors of Gilead prepared for battle, Jephthah stepped aside to pray. Dust rose in the evening air, his cloak brushing the ground as he fell to his knees. "O Lord," he cried, "if you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in triumph shall be yours, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering." The vow hung in the air, desperate, dangerous, and irreversible. The next morning, the trumpet sounded. The men followed Jephthah into war, their cries echoing through the valleys. And the Lord gave them victory. The Ammonites fell before Israel's swords, and Jephthah returned home a hero. But destiny waited behind his door. The battle was over. The Ammonite army lay crushed, and Israel shouted in victory. Jephthah, their once rejected leader, returned home, dust on his armor, glory in his eyes. The sun dipped low, casting golden light over the road to Mizpah. Villagers gathered, drums beating, women singing songs of triumph. Jephthah smiled for the first time in years. He thought of home, of peace, of rest. But then, from the doorway of his house came a sound that turned victory to ashes. A young girl ran out, dancing with tambourines, laughter bright as morning. His heart froze. It was his only child. His daughter. The one he had vowed, without knowing, to offer to the Lord. He tore his clothes and fell to the ground. "Oh no, my daughter. You have brought me low. I have made a vow to the Lord, and I cannot go back." The girl stopped, her tambourine falling silent. The crowd's cheers faded. "Father," she said softly, "you have made a vow to the Lord. Do to me according to what you have spoken, for the Lord has given you victory over your enemies." Her voice did not tremble. There was no fear, only peace, the kind that comes from faith deeper than understanding. Tears streamed down Jephthah's face as she continued. Only let me go up to the mountains for 2 months, that I may weep for my virginity, I and my friends. And he agreed. The soldiers who once saw him as unshakable now watched him crumble, broken not by battle but by love. The mountains of Israel stood silent as Jephthah's daughter climbed their slopes, her friends beside her. By day they sang soft hymns. By night, they wept under the stars. Their laughter mixed with sorrow, echoing through the valleys like a lament for all the daughters who would never wed, never bear children, never dance again. She spoke to the wind, to God, to destiny itself. I was born for this moment, not for shame, but for purpose. And when the 2 months were over, she returned home, her heart steady, her spirit unbroken. Jephthah stood outside his house once more, the same place where his joy had turned to sorrow. His daughter approached quietly, her steps slow, her face peaceful. "Father," she whispered, "I am ready." The scriptures do not reveal exactly what followed. But it tells us this: Jephthah fulfilled his vow to the Lord. Some say he offered her as a burnt offering. Others believe she was dedicated to lifelong service, living the rest of her days in solitude, never marrying. But whichever it was, her sacrifice became a symbol of faith, and of a father's tragic devotion. From that day, the daughters of Israel went out each year to lament Jephthah's daughter, honoring her courage and her obedience. After the vow was fulfilled, the land of Gilead fell silent. The victory banners still waved, but Jephthah's heart was empty. He had won the war but lost his joy. Each night, the echoes of his daughter's laughter haunted him. In the stillness of his tent, he prayed for forgiveness, not from men, but from God. "Lord," he whispered, "I am a man of broken promises and broken peace. Yet let my pains serve as remembrance for generations, that no vow should be made in haste." But God still had work for him. Israel needed a judge, and Jephthah, even in sorrow, was still a man of destiny. Despite his pain, Jephthah led Israel with strength. For 6 years, he judged the people with fairness and courage. He restored order in Gilead, rebuilt towns shattered by war, and reminded the people that victory without humility leads only to ruin. When disputes arose, his words carried the weight of both authority and sorrow, because those who suffer understand justice deeper than most. "Remember," he would say, "the Lord delivers not for pride, but for purpose." The people respected him. Even those who once rejected him now called him Judge Jephthah, the outcast who became their defender. But peace never lasts long in the land of Israel. The men of Ephraim, proud and quick to anger, rose against Jephthah. "Why did you go to fight the Ammonites without calling us?" they shouted. "We will burn your house down with you inside." Jephthah's patience cracked. "When I called you, you did not come. You left us to fight alone. And now, after the Lord has delivered them into my hands, you come to fight me?" The confrontation turned bloody. The Gileadites and Ephraimites clashed at the Jordan River. To tell friend from foe, Jephthah's men used a test. "Say, Shibboleth." But the Ephraimites could not pronounce it properly, they said Sibboleth. And so, one by one, they were struck down at the crossing. 42,000 fell that day, a tragic mark on Jephthah's leadership. The years passed, and Jephthah grew weary. His victories brought peace, but his heart never healed. At night, he walked alone through the fields of Gilead, where the wind whispered through the grass. Every sound reminded him of the daughter who once danced with tambourines. He had led, fought, and judged, but never escaped the shadow of his vow. When his final day came, there was no war horn, no battle cry. Only silence, and peace at last. "The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away," he murmured. "Blessed be his name." And Jephthah, the outcast turned leader, breathed his last. Generations passed, and the dust of Gilead settled over Jephthah's tomb. But stories never die. They breathe through the voices of those who remember. Around campfires and temple courts, parents spoke in low tones of the judge who rose from rejection, the warrior who made a vow that shook heaven and earth. Some said Jephthah was a man cursed by his own words. Others said he was a man blessed by courage, one who trusted God even when the cost was unbearable. The old scribes wrote, "He judged Israel 6 years, and he was buried in a city of Gilead." Simple words. Yet behind them lay a lifetime of triumph, pain, and sacrifice. Mothers told their daughters of Jephthah's child, of her obedience, her faith, her willingness to submit to the will of God. Each year, they went out to the mountains to remember her. You could almost hear their voices rise with the wind, a lament carried through centuries. She gave her youth for the sake of her father's promise. And though Jephthah's house grew quiet, his name lingered, not as a curse, but as a warning and a lesson to every man who would dare to speak lightly before the Almighty. Centuries later, long after kings had risen and fallen, Jephthah's name appeared again, etched into the sacred scrolls of Hebrews 11, among the heroes of faith. And what shall I say more? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, and of Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah. The God who had watched his pain had not forgotten him. Heaven had recorded not his failure, but his faith. Because faith is not perfection. It is the courage to trust God when you do not understand his ways. And that is what Jephthah did. He believed when others doubted. He led when others feared. He sacrificed when others fled. The angels themselves must have looked upon his story and whispered, "Here is a man who gave everything, and still believed." His legacy stretched beyond bloodlines and battles. It became a mirror for every believer who has ever made a promise they could not bear to keep, yet still clung to God's mercy. For Jephthah teaches us this. Even in the ashes of regret, grace can still bloom. Night draped itself across the hills of Gilead. The moon hung low, spilling silver light over quiet stones, the same ground where Jephthah once walked, prayed, and wept. A solitary traveler paused beside his grave. He was an old soldier, one who had fought under Jephthah's banner many years ago. He knelt, pressing his hand against the earth. "You taught us courage," he whispered. "You taught us that God's promises stand even when ours falter." Wind rustled through the grass, carrying faint echoes of drums, tambourines, and laughter long gone. The land remembered. From that night onward, the traveler became the first of many pilgrims who came to honor the judge who rose from rejection and left behind a legacy carved in both glory and grief. They built a small altar near his resting place, a monument not of gold or marble, but of memory. And upon it they inscribed these words: Jephthah of Gilead, the outcast who trusted God. Every year, as the daughters of Israel climbed the hills to sing and weep for Jephthah's daughter, they stopped at that altar. Some came in silence. Others came with songs. But all left with the same thought burning in their hearts. Obedience costs. Faith costs more. Time, in the way of time, kept moving. Kingdoms rose like the swell of a great sea, prophets cried out in marketplaces, priests burned incense in sanctuaries whose roofs reached higher than the tents of Jephthah's day. The world changed around the hill, but some stories, like stones river polished smooth, kept their shape. Scholars wrote, and scribes copied, and in the margins of many manuscripts, Jephthah's tale took on new life. He was a name in a list of heroes. He was a cautionary tale scribbled into the margins of sermons. He was a whisper in the corridors of temples during debates about vows and law. But beneath the ink and parchment, the human core remained, a father who loved a daughter, a leader who trusted God, a community who learned the cost of their scorn. In one peaceful morning, not long after the harvest moon, a teacher from a distant village visited the mound. He had read of Jephthah in the book of the faithful and had come seeking more than a name. He wanted the story to shape the hearts of those he taught. He sat on a low rock and called his students to him, boys and girls, some of them already old enough to swing a slingshot, others who still braided each other's hair. He told them the whole story, not as a legend, not as a myth, but as a careful, honest history: the rejection, the exile, Jephthah's forging of a band of men, the return, the vow, the daughter's acceptance, the lonely years of leadership, and the tragic clash with Ephraim. He spoke not with condemnation, but with a teacher's deliberate hand. "We do not emulate the wound," he said. "We read it. We learn from it. Courage without thought becomes a dagger, faith without wisdom becomes a storm." One child raised her hand. She had a quick mind and a fire in her eyes. "Teacher," she asked, "did God forsake Jephthah when he made that vow?" The teacher paused. He looked across the field where the valley opened wide and the wind disturbed the wheat with a constant sigh. "No," he said finally. "God did not forsake him. God kept faith with Israel, even when a man failed." Jephthah's life is proof that God's grace meets failure not with scorn, but with calling. The same God who allowed him to lead also allowed him to bear late grief. And the same God who honored his faith still teaches us to be careful with speech. These lessons spread. The daughter's lament, originally an annual hour of mourning, became for many a ritual of remembrance that moved beyond sorrow into consecration. They sang for the girl who had no husband, but in their songs they also sang for all those who were made brave by faith. These gatherings, once private and mournful, became a public testament not to blind zeal but to faithful obedience, carefully cultivated. Centuries later, a traveler reciting the old songs reached the markets of a city where many tongues were spoken. He found in the crowd a young preacher who had never been to Gilead but whose heart knew the ache of promises. The traveler's song slid into the preacher's ear like a seed. Years later, that preacher would write a list of faithful men and women, a litany of those who had trusted God against the odds, and there, among names that sang of victory and weakness, of cleverness and failure, he would write Jephthah's name. Not as a condemnation, but as a testimony. In that list, Jephthah's story became a thread in a larger tapestry, a reminder that the measure of a life is not perfection but perseverance in faith. People who read the list did not forget the girl's lament. They did not erase the sorrow. But they also read the name with respect, a man who rose from rejection to leadership, who stood in the breach, who carried weight no man should carry alone, yet who never again flinched from responsibility. When the narrator's voice closes on Jephthah's name now, it does so with both a shiver and a sigh. He is remembered not to be emulated blindly, but to be understood, not to be idolized, but to be learned from. For every leader who wields power, Jephthah's story is the quiet hand on the shoulder that says, "Choose your words like you choose your weapons, keep your promises like you keep your vows to God and neighbor." Jephthah's story is not an easy one. It is a story of broken vows and broken hearts, of victories shadowed by loss. Yet it is also the story of a man who, though marred by mistake, never walked away from the consequences of his words. He led, he failed, he loved, and he believed. If this narrative has touched you, if it has stirred questions about vows, leadership, or what it means to stay faithful when the cost is great, then there's power in sharing that spark. Hit the like button to help others find this tale. Subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the next cinematic Bible story that brings ancient truth to modern life. Tell us in the comments, if you were Jephthah, what would you have done? Be brave in your answer. We read every comment, and your perspective helps others wrestle with these same difficult questions.